The other thing making news is that Donald Trump apparently ran an ad recently and had more language in this ad that suggested a sort of Nazi tone. There was a term called unified Reich in the ad, and of course, what do? Every single time something like this happens, you blame it on somebody else. You say, I didn't know about it. And I don't know how many times we have to hear this out of Donald Trump, out of MAGA people's mouths, that they don't know, that it was an intern, that it was this. Whoops, we didn't know, or else we would have never done that. We didn't know that the conference I went to, that the guy is he's a proud Nazi and goes on his podcast and tell everybody he's a Nazi. I had no idea. I was just going there to speak to young Republicans. It's that same game that we have to listen to every time, and it's boring. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that will just continue to defend it to the death. And I'm not even just talking about the people who are caught. I'm talking about the people who just fall in line for this entire cult of what is going on with this whole MAGA movement. And again, what we're all hoping for is that we can end this movement come November. Will it end completely? No, but it's a pretty good punch in the face to beat Donald Trump for a second time. And then there's no stopping the trials. I'm afraid that we may not see another trial. Now, I will also say that I've read some other people that think that this is sort of a sky is falling thing, and that at least one, maybe the two of these trials will happen before the election. So do not panic. But, again, this is all future stuff. It's all speculation. But the bottom line is, and I think we all know this, anybody that's watching this podcast knows that the most important thing is to beat Donald Trump at the ballot. That's what we have to do. And anything and everything that people can go out there, and anybody that's on the fence that you're talking to, you could try to talk to some MAGA people, get a sense of how deep into MAGA they are. If they think it's just funny, those people are easier to convert than the people that obviously buy the flags, the t-shirts, the hats, and dress their entire fucking house up in MAGA stuff. Very bizarre behavior. But this is the ad in question that Donald Trump ran. Let's take a look at it. And at the very end, you'll see the words on the bottom right.
What happens after Donald Trump wins?
First of all, Donald Trump won't win.
What's next for America? The economy booms.
The economy is booming now. In fact, we've been over this before. Anybody that's confused about the economy, there is still a little bit of a higher inflation rate than the Federal Reserve and the rest of the country, including myself, whose personal job is affected by the interest rates in the economy. But overall, the economy, the comeback that this country has made from the devastation from COVID, and if you want to, if I'm being honest, all the jobs lost when inflation started to rise, everything that started to happen, it started to happen under Trump's watch. However, I don't blame Donald Trump for that. It doesn't matter who the president was at the time. What was happening then was going to happen to any president. And it's kind of easy to figure this out why. And the best way to figure this out is to understand and realize that this happened across the entire world. It did not just happen here in America, but the recovery from COVID in the United States, since Joe Biden has been president, the economy has improved better than any other country in the world by far. We are everybody's jealous of how well we have recovered. We had an inflation rate at one point in 2022 of 9%. They got it down to 3% last year in just 1 year. Now, there are some things that are still keeping this inflation high, and the Federal Reserve is still sticking to their guns on not raising the rates. And everybody's trying to figure out what exactly is the best way to get this inflation down. I do believe, I personally believe, just from everything that I've read, that a lot of this is corporate greed, and a lot of the corporations that raised their prices during COVID, some of them justified because of the shortage of supplies when there was a supply chain issue. So some of that was justified, but supply chains issues apparently, leveled off, and there were no more supply chain issues. But you know what they continue to do? They continue to keep those high prices, and then every quarter they'd get on their corporate phone calls and their public calls, and you can listen to them and brag about their corporate profits. And me personally, and I think every American should be in this camp, that if we are in inflationary times, it should be illegal to raise prices and make record profits. It's very similar to if there is a hurricane, and a hurricane's coming through, and they raise the prices of gasoline, they raise the price of water, and they price gouge you. In fact, the Democrats try to put together a bill and pass a bill, an anti-price gouging act, and the Republicans turned it down. So that is one thing about the economy. I know we're in the middle of this ridiculous Trump ad, but every time I hear about the economy, it drives me insane, because the economy is strong. The stock market the other day hit 40,000. Now, I will also admit, the stock market is not an indication of how well or bad the economy is doing. It does play a role, and there is a factor in it, but it's not the ultimate thing to look at and go, our economy is strong because the stock market is strong. There's very few people in the stock market, so you don't have a lot of participation in the stock market. It's either, big wigs on Wall Street, or, a lot of us do have 401ks, so that kind of plays in. But for the most part, like I said, the economy is stronger than people think. Are we where we need to be? No. One last thing on this. Target just announced that they are going to lower prices for 5,000 items in their stores. And why that is extremely important, or at least we hope it is that other companies and other stores and other places follow suit, because now it's a competitive thing. If somebody like Target is lowering their prices, others are going to be forced to lower their prices as well. And if that does indeed happen, I think you're going to see that inflation rate go down to where it is that we want to see it. But anyway, sorry about that. Let's get back to this ad.
American energy is unleashed, and an end to crushing taxes. The border is closed, and the largest deportation in history is underway.
Real quick, the end to crushing taxes, he's talking to billionaires.
No more wars.
And by the way, they're not crushing taxes already.
As we focus on home, law and order is restored. The American dream is back, and the best is yet to come. Make America great again.
There it is on the bottom. If you
What happened?
saw, let's go back here. If we can go to the end, it's right on the bottom right there. Again, using more of this Nazi type language. He used it when he called his political opponents vermin. And what he say, that the immigrants are poisoning the blood of the society, or whatever it is that he said in that vein. So, it shocks me, and it makes me sad to think that there are a lot of people that look at this and either embrace it or ignore it. And I think both of them are just as scary. Why, you wouldn't look at this, if it's funny is that when you call a racist, or a xenophobe, they get very defensive, and they're like, oh, you just use that card. If they truly weren't, that would bother them. They would say, well, no, there's no way I can vote for that, because, we understand who Hitler is. We understand what happened to the Jewish community during Hitler's time. So that's a little too far for me. But they don't. In fact, a lot of them go out and get more flags and T-shirts and hats, which is absolutely ridiculous. And speaking of ridiculous, this is Donald Trump, the guy who has this sort of language in his ads, talking to Jewish voters, and he has a message for them.
And Jewish people that go for Biden and the Democrats, they should have their head examined. Thank you very much.
He's got a hell of a way of trying to draw in voters. He told Nikki Haley voters, basically, we don't need you, which he clearly does. But to not even say, hey, I got a message for the Jewish people. There may be some out there that may not like me, or there may be some people out there, but here's what I do for you, or here's what. That's how most normal people would handle it. But he's not a normal person. And a lot of people say, well, that's why I vote for him, because he's not a normal politician. Okay, you're right. He's not a normal politician, but he's just not a normal human being either. He's a clown. He's a shit show on legs. I mean, it is just beyond unbelievable to me that anybody not only would vote for him the first time, because when people voted for him the first time, I still don't get it, because I hear people go, well, I get it because he was a new guy and he shook things up. He shook up Hollywood, or not Hollywood, Washington. But you still saw who this guy was. You still heard the words coming out of his mouth. And back then, he was not very smart. Today, I mean, literally, I'm not kidding. Every time I hear this dude talk, every single time, I just picture a 7-year-old up in front of class reading his report. And it just so, it's beneath us. This guy is beneath us. And the fact that he is as close as he is to the presidency of the United States makes me sick to my stomach. But Joe Biden had a response to his video. And I like what the Biden campaign is doing here. They are responding a lot to Donald Trump, which I know drives him insane. But let's take a look real quick at his response.
For America.
Is this on his official account? Wow. A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power. I care about you.
Okay, so I'll certainly admit that, it's not like they caught Joe Biden in a room, happened to be looking at it, and they were recording it. We all know that. There's acting there, and, probably may or may not have been his idea. But at the end of the day, the fact that they come up with these ideas and they say, Mr. President, I think this would be a good idea for you to do. And he looks at it and goes, yeah, I do too. I do like the approach. I like the approach of just basically hitting Donald Trump where it hurts him the most. And that's his ego. His ego is so fragile and so it's just, he has a very hard time being laughed at. And, he's been for so long used to people scared of him. And there are people still scared of him. And that's why I still believe that he feels comfortable still in this role, because there's so many people kissing his ass, and they're doing it more so now in a manner that is just, I don't know. It's way beneath me as a man. I just could not stoop to the level of pretending, because they are all pretending. They don't like this guy. They don't think he's smart. They don't think he's great for the country, but they need his voters, and his voters are very, very gullible people. So when you are not only defending the king, but you're doing it in a way that sounds like you're ready to go to battle with these libtards and these Democrats, it jacks these people up. And make no mistake about it, Donald Trump speaking at the NRA last week, Donald Trump is still mentioning that they're coming after your guns. All this language that they do, there is absolutely no question in my mind, the back of the blue, even though they only back the blue when it's against the people they don't like. But when it's against them, they can't stand the blue. The blue can go fuck itself. But make no mistake, is when they keep putting this language out there that they're coming after your guns. And, you've heard enough MAGA people with the response, I dare them to come after my guns. Wait till you see what happens when you come on my, all that dumb shit. And the language of back the blue, they're basically trying to form an army of people that if things do get out of hand, that they will take action. Stand back and stand by is not just a little quip that Donald Trump came up with for the Proud Boys that time. And they attempted it the first time and they've learned from their mistakes, and they will look back and go, oh, we're going to do it differently this time. And this time, I promise you, we will succeed, and you're not going to like what happens to you. And they are really getting into the heads of these very gullible and simple people, whether it is, just a regular Joe who has his guns and he has really no life other than a gentleman that is trolling liberals and making them think that somebody like me and somebody like Lana are the mortal enemy that are out to destroy this country, which is, of course, again, absolutely ridiculous. They are forming their army with very impressionable police officers too. And believe me, there are more of them out there than you think. I know a few police officers that I believe, you know, have pretty strong feelings about Donald Trump and MAGA. And I think they're preparing them for some sort of, we used the term before, civil war. And I think that they really truly believe that this could happen. And, you know, we are probably as close to a civil war happening as any time in our history, except for, of course, when the first Civil War happened. Now, when I say we're as close, 10, 15%, but that's a big number compared to really a 0% chance at one point in this country. I mean, you know, actually, I shouldn't say zero. I mean, there's always been strife and there's always been bad things that have happened in this country. But I think a lot of the marginalized groups were not looking for war. They were just looking for fairness. And this MAGA faction is looking for war, but it's under the guise of phony fairness, or it's under the guise of things that are just not true, that are just not happening. You cannot tell me that decades of terrible things have happened to marginalized communities in this country. It is clear there are no antidotes here. There are thousands of different examples that we can give, but they like to pick and choose antidotes. Like, you know, I was saying last week, when we talk about Laken Riley, you can ask a MAGA and bring that name up and they'll go, yeah, that's illegal, came in and killed her. And they act like this is happening all over the place. And then you ask them for another name and they cannot name another name. They can only name Laken Riley because she's the one antidote that they can pull out and say, see, I told you this was happening, when it really is not happening. It's a terrible thing that happened to that young lady. And there's absolutely nobody. There's not a Democrat or a liberal, whatever the fuck you want to call. None of them are going, who gives a fuck? It doesn't matter. We should still let them in, and we should still let it's crazy to me that there's just the language that goes on around this country and how easily suckered and duped people are into believing this. But I don't know. We have 7 months, we're 7 months, 6 months away from the election. And, you know, we see polls back and forth. Some of them are scary. Some of them are better. But I've said before, you know, about the polls, we've talked about this numerous times, that there's so many polls that we have looked at over the last, since really 2016. And there have been a lot of polls that have scared the shit out of Democrats. But when the results come in, every single time, Democrats are like, holy shit, did you see what happened? Not only did we just win, won by 15 points, won by 12 points. We won in red states. We're winning all over the place. We're barely losing the House when we should have historically got blown out and held on to the Senate. It almost never happens. But you know, I that's why I've said before, I think, you know, we all need to get to a point where we start to say, I don't really give a fuck about the polls because they seem to have been wrong every time. Now, that may be perceived as putting your guard down. That does not mean we're putting our guard down. It still means that there is work to do. There is going to be a very close election coming up. And, I think everybody just needs to do their part to understand. I'm just having this conversation with my brother last night is, we have so many different factions out there talking politics now. I mean, we're talking about people who really never talked about politics in their life. And, now we have so many different voices, so many different people talking. I mean, you have hundreds, thousands of podcasts and YouTube shows like this one, and people get confused. They're like, God damn, I hear so many different opinions. I don't know what to believe. And I could see and understand every once in a while why it could get confusing. But, some of them, some of the things that come up, it's really logistical. All you really have to do is just kind of put two and two together on a lot of this stuff and you can figure it out. Google is a great tool. Google will tell everybody exactly what's going on. Some of it is opinion, but you can read in black and white specific things that you want to look up. I had somebody did not want to agree with me the other day when I told them the United States had the #1 economy in the world right now. And they're like, no, they don't. No, they don't. I said, they do. They're like, no. I said, no. They started getting into, so I said, this is, listen, we can argue about opinion, but this is a fact. You could just go clearly look this up yourself. We absolutely have the #1 economy in the world right now. Are we perfect and where we want to be? No, but we definitely have the #1 economy in the world. So